In the name of the one holy and living God. Amen. Good morning. I imagine maybe some of you, maybe all of you, I doubt it, but maybe some of you have noticed that some of our most familiar phrases in worship have changed in the start of this program year. Things like the celebrant opening the service by saying, God be with you, instead of the Lord be with you. Or at the end of each lesson, the reader saying, hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people, instead of the word of the Lord. Maybe you haven't noticed any of that at all. Maybe you've heard these phrases before if you've worshiped at a different Episcopal church somewhere else. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe you like the old way better. Maybe you like that there's something new. Just so you know, these words come from the supplemental to the Book of Common Prayer called Enriching Our Worship. The priest just doesn't change the words willy-nilly based on a whim. But why do we even make these changes? Why does the church even bother to go through writing a supplemental? Surely many people have asked me, why did we ever stop using the 1928 prayer book? Nobody asked why did we stop using 1662 or the prayer books before that, but when I was in college, I went to a conservatory, like Peabody Conservatory here in Baltimore. I was at New England Conservatory up in Boston. And one of our undergraduate requirements was a semester in 20th century contemporary and modern music. Many of us, myself included, did not like this class. We wanted to be filled with the sounds of Beethoven and Mozart and all the familiar Western European classical traditions which had drawn us to the conservatory in the first place. And all this new music with its strange harmonies and dissonances and atonalities, Schoenberg and its weird rhythms. So one day, I distinctly remember Professor Hoffman, God rest his soul, listening to our complaints that we weren't spending enough time with the old masters. And he said, you know what? Every year at the start of school, I walk through the doors of NEC into our grand foyer of Jordan Hall, and I see the towering marble statue of Beethoven atop a pedestal larger than life, and I think to myself, is this a school of music where we are trying to learn something new, or is this just a museum? Are we a conservatory or just a bearer of tradition? I think that's a really good question for us, for the institutional church. Are we a living, breathing, changing thing, a group of people who come together and are new each and every time we do so? And we do new things in ways that might rattle us or disappoint us or delight us or challenge us? Or are we simply bearers of a tradition? Because let's face it, it is a comfort to retreat to a place where we know what to say, what to do, and what to expect. Is that certainty the nexus of our faith? I hear that question in both of our story lessons this morning. Does your faith lie in what you already know, or is your faith actually placed in God? By what authority are you leading us into this empty desert? The Israelites asked Moses. By what authority are you doing these new things in our church? The priests asked Jesus. Now, I'm sure in that first story, everyone started out really excited when they got going. They had a big dinner together. They saw the Lord's awesome power in defeating Pharaoh and escaping Egypt. I mean, they had just seen the Red Sea being parted and those walls of water come crashing down on their captors. I am sure they were all like, yay, we won the big game. And they're heading out onto this adventure. But now, that's all gone. All the anticipation and excitement has been replaced with, wow, we really made the wrong decision. What were we thinking that Moses could actually lead us through this and take charge? What were we thinking that we even left? Because at least back there we knew where our next meal was coming from. And Moses, poor Moses, he's completely unsure of himself and he's terrified they're going to have a coup and stone him to death. Now, from our vantage point, this is a simple story because why? We know the ending. We know what happens. We didn't spend 40 years with them in the desert, did we? But they are literally starving and dying of thirst. Now, who among us has not started out on some adventure and known that feeling of excitement and anticipation, that eagerness to get to where you are going? And almost without knowing it, you have solidified the outcome in your mind. You've already pictured how it's all going to turn out. You're sure what there is there to expect, and the journey is kind of secondary to it. And as you move towards your goal, when things are going well, great, God is on my side. Oh, what a providential, wonderful, good God we have. But then, when things don't go as planned, when the unexpected pops up, when things maybe even start to fall apart, what? Is God here or not? We don't give a lot of time to our doubts when things are going well, right? It's when things don't go our way. That's when we join with these ancient people in their desert of doubt saying, hey, is the Lord here or not? And what I hear St. Paul reminding us in between these two stories is that that is the most important place to be. That's the place that St. Paul is writing about in his letter to his doubting Philippians. That place of uncertainty, of not knowing. That is the place you work it out, because that is exactly how and where God is at work in you. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who is at work in you. Is Moses scared? Of course he is, and he's got to work it out. Are the people scared? Of course they are, and they've got to work it out. And what they do in the midst of that doubt, that's what matters. What they do, they are doubting, but they still call together the elders. They still walk out there with Moses. Moses still goes and prays to God, and then at the end, they do get the water they need. This is very similar to what I hear Jesus telling these priests in that very strange little parable. There are these two sons. We probably think of them as little like spoiled brats, don't we? Although we don't know why they don't go do what their father asked them to do. One says to his dad, no, I am not going to go to the vineyard today and do my work. But then he changes his mind. The other one says, sure, Dad, I'll go, but then he doesn't. We have no idea what their motivations are, but Jesus asks the priest, which one did the right thing? The first one. The one who says no, but then changes his mind. Maybe it was reluctantly, maybe it was joyfully. Jesus doesn't tell us, which tells me it doesn't matter, because what seems to matter is that actions speak louder than words. No matter what they were feeling or thinking or doubting, they went and did the will of the Father. The priests do not like that Jesus is coming into their house of worship, which I assure you they have made a restricted museum, and is stirring things up with his new teaching and his new preaching and his new words and gestures. He is finding new ways to name something they seem to have forgotten since they were left alone in the desert, that their God is a loving and forgiving and all-encompassing God and wants the tax collectors and the prostitutes. And that's why Jesus says they get there first, because they're just doing what I'm asking you to do. They're going to John the Baptist and asking for forgiveness, and they don't care about what they've been labeled anymore. The priests, on the other hand, are so terrified of losing their authority, of letting go of their rigid ways, that they just argue and grumble over with each other over how to even talk to Jesus, how to answer his questions. They're not really interested in working anything out. They just want Jesus out, and they want to go back to the way they've always done it. Their fear and trembling is about losing their power as something new comes into their lives. They have closed their hearts and minds to any possibility of being able to even see who is standing before them. I mean, those words, fear and trembling, well, they create fear and trembling, right? But when I hear them, I don't hear Paul telling me that God is going to pounce down on me with God's divine judgment at my mistakes or the words I wish I could go back and reclaim in my life. Our God is a loving God. So what I hear is Paul saying, I know it's really hard. I know it's hard when you're at that place of total doubt and not knowing what to do, when things are falling apart in your life, and that fear and trembling is a part of it. The psalmist writes that fear is the beginning of wisdom. But of course we're scared when we don't know where God is going to lead us. That is the beginning of humility. Saying, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how long it will take. I don't know myself what the outcome may be. But that's also so liberating to let go of our rigid hold on our certainty, of our narrow and preconceived ideas, when whatever God could do could be so much bigger than we could ever imagine. Which, by the way, is why we practice some of these things when we come together for an hour or so each and every Sunday. To have these small little reminders of things changing, the words we say, the phrases we utter, the holy prayers that cross our lips. It helps us take note. Are we reluctant? Are we excited? Do we even care? It helps us pay attention and maybe get curious, because paying attention in the journey is the whole point. Where is your faith this morning? Do you have faith in your doubts? Could you be using your doubts to deepen your faith? Who is the authority in your life? Is it you or is it God? Hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people. Amen.